Welcome. Welcome, folks. Glad to have you. So I'm Quinny Sanchez Lopez. I am the community advisor for the Digital Benefits Network, Digital Identity Community of Practice. Welcome to this session on the Digital Doorways to Public Benefits Research Report. If you haven't already, I invite you to introduce yourself in the chat with your name, your organization, and something you look forward to learning on the call. So we're going to go ahead and get started, and we're going to do that by hearing directly from the beneficiaries we spoke to during our research by playing the video introduction of the project. Their willingness to participate and consent to recording were central to our understanding and ability to relay their experiences of the public benefits application process, account management, identity proofing, and what it means for them to share their personal information. So with that, we're going to go ahead and start by playing the video, but continue to please introduce yourself in the chat.
I'm 61 years young. I've been a cook most of my life. The past year or so, health issues, I haven't worked. Everything's good now. Yeah, the technology, a lot of it's just, I just don't get it. Computer, I need help. Like I'll go to the library down the street today to do my onboarding for my new job. I'll probably have to have someone help me. Yeah, that was like if I get the code, like it'll be on the screen, and then you got to go to your email. It's something simple, but I'd lose it. So I got two phones, and if I'm online for both of them, I'll get this from my email, and then I'll punch it in on my other phone.
I have one main email that I use now. Unfortunately, some of my old stored stuff are under emails that are now dormant. Like the other email, I think I don't even know how to get into it. So there's probably stuff there that I may need at some point, but I'm not going to slay that bear today. The problem is that I've lived in a million places, and sometimes it's confusing, and I'm older, so where did I live, and but usually I recognize like the streets. But there's some places where I was like a little bit unstable, and like I don't remember where I lived.
My phone at least it creates its own password sometimes. Like before you can even think of a password, it'll try and stick a password in there, and that's very annoying because it's like I'm not gonna remember some random numbers that my phone stuck together. So then sometimes I'll have to like redo the application or the program, and that could take some time.
I think sometimes you put like, I don't know, swallow your pride and do what you have to do in order to get the assistance, whether you feel comfortable with it or not. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm pretty sure 99% of the people will say they don't feel comfortable having to supply a lot of stuff that they feel is their personal information. But in order to get the services you need, that is part of the process, so we just do it.
Usually they have a phone number, they have an email for you to contact them. You can actually physically talk to a person, not always online texting. I'm more comfortable when I can actually talk to a person, give them my information. Yeah, I don't really feel comfortable if I can't talk to you. You have to be very cautious nowadays because people can really steal your identification fast.
A little resentful that they seem to know who I am when they want me to pay taxes and everything, but then all of a sudden when they're supposed to be doing something for me, they're like, well, do I know you? Who are you?
Thank you. If you're just joining us, I'm Quinny. I am the Community Advisor for the Digital Benefit Network's Digital Identity Community of Practice, and we just watched the video introduction to the Digital Doorways project. Today we'll be covering the why, how, and what of the report while making time to highlight what we hope to see next in the ecosystem. We'll conclude the call by giving you time to ask questions about the process and findings with the research team. The meeting that we have right now will be recorded and published on the Digital Governments Hub. We will share the slides following the session. Throughout this session, we ask that you maintain a respectful environment as the Digital Benefits Network does not tolerate harassment of any of participants in any form. If you're new to the DBN, I invite you to take a look at our community norms and code of conduct, which are linked in the chat. Okay, next slide. For those of you who don't know us yet, the Digital Benefits Network is a project of the Beeck Center for Social Impact and Innovation at Georgetown University. DBN supports government in delivering public benefit services and technology that are accessible, effective, and equitable in order to ultimately increase economic opportunity. We work with people who design, deliver, administer, use, and influence public benefits, and we support a national network of practitioners by providing convening spaces, as well as new tools and timely, actionable research on pressing topics in digital identity, integrated eligibility, and enrollment systems. We work across key benefits programs, including food and nutrition, including SNAP and WIC, health, cash assistance, childcare, and unemployment insurance. Okay, next slide. Our team at the Digital Benefits Network collaborated with Public Policy Lab on this research. Our full Digital Doorways team included Elizabeth Bynum-Sorrell, Rachel Mead-Smith, Brielle Marucci, Jamie Stock, myself, Anka Stolman, Judy Park-Lee, and Eliza Fox. Next slide. And on today's session, I'll be joined by Elizabeth Bynum-Sorrell and Ariel Kennan from the DBN, as well as by Jamie Stock from Public Policy Lab. To tell you more about the project, I'll pass it on to Liz, who led it.
Thanks so much, Quinny, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. So, as many of you know, the DBN has been researching digital identity in public benefits since 2022. Public benefits agencies have the challenging mandate of enabling access while protecting state systems and also the personal information that clients are required to provide to access benefits. Our team started working on this topic because we knew from media coverage and our relationships with advocates and legal aid professionals, as well as conversations with state agencies, that people were facing challenges creating and managing accounts and proving their identities when accessing public benefits. This was something we were especially seeing in unemployment insurance. In an effort to respond to fraud from organized criminal groups during the pandemic, state agencies implemented new identity proofing requirements, which in some cases meant eligible individuals were blocked from applying or faced significant delays accessing benefits. But this is also something we saw coming up in other programs, and in recent years, we've seen benefits portals targeted through attacks that use stolen credentials to access beneficiary accounts and personal information. For many internet users, tasks like entering a username and password or using multi-factor authentication to access an account are routine and inconsequential. But for public benefits access, when these processes don't work, the stakes are very high. Recognizing that digital identity processes present challenges both for agencies and for users sparked our research in 2022 to build a shared understanding of the landscape of digital identity approaches in public benefits and create resources to support shared vocabulary and technical understanding. But we also noticed there had been limited publicly available research documenting people's firsthand experiences with these processes. We believe that to build processes that are truly secure and inclusive, we must first understand who is struggling, how, and why. This project is a step towards filling that gap by speaking with beneficiaries directly about their experiences creating accounts, accessing portals and applications, and proving who they are. As we at the DBN were starting to imagine what this research might look like, we knew we needed a partner who could help us conduct this research in a human-centered way, which is why we were so excited to partner with Public Policy Lab. Much of what we learned likely resonates with things you've encountered in your own work with clients or beneficiaries, but we think it's important to have research-backed evidence about real people's experiences with digital identity processes that's available in a publicly shareable format in order to make improvements as an ecosystem. Through our interviews, we also learned a great deal about people's feelings about technology and sharing personal information online more generally. While we felt this research needed to happen for some time, we also see particular urgency around this topic right now. We conducted this research in the spring of 2025, and we carried out our interviews in a moment of anticipated change to public benefits policy and delivery, but before the shape of those changes was fully clear. We believe our findings offer evergreen insights into beneficiaries' experiences using technology to access public programs online and the support that might make those processes more seamless. Given the HR1 SNAP cost shifts to states based on payment error rates and new work reporting requirements in Medicaid, state agencies will likely require additional and consistent touchpoints with beneficiaries in the coming years. We believe it's imperative that the process of interacting with agencies, for example, reaccessing portals and accounts, is as easy and straightforward as possible to enable access and program administration. We can move on to the next slide here. You'll hear much more about our process in a moment from our partners at Public Policy Lab, and after that, I'll spend time walking through our insights and actionable recommendations. But before I do, I want to emphasize that perhaps the most exciting part of sharing this project is that because of how we were able to work with Public Policy Lab, we're able to directly share, with their consent, the stories of the beneficiaries who spoke to us, as you've just seen in our video overview. This work would not have been possible without our partnership with Public Policy Lab or the beneficiaries who spoke with us. And I also want to thank all the organizations across the country who helped make this research possible, either by connecting us with beneficiaries or providing space, including Just a Start, Boston Public Library, Greater Boston Legal Services, and Mass Design Group in Boston, Wildfire Arizona and Pima County Public Library System in Arizona, and the Yonkers Public Library in New York State. So with that, I will pass it over to Jamie.
Great. I'm Jamie Stock of the Public Policy Lab, and we can go to the next slide. We believe that we are the first nonprofit established in the US specifically to do human-centered policy design work with and for Americans. And we partner with the government and non-government organizations, as well as other partners, to improve service delivery systems and the policies that enable those systems. And we generally focus on the experiences of low-income and often marginalized communities within the US. Next slide. We are headquartered in Brooklyn, but we have partnered with dozens of agencies, philanthropy institutions across the country. We've actually conducted research with the residents of more than half of the states, and I've personally conducted research with the residents of 4 states. And we have the extensive case studies on a lot of our different projects on our website. So I'm not going to go into any of the other projects right now, but we try to publish as much as we can to make knowledge available. And so you can find detailed descriptions of more of our projects there. Next slide. The approach we take to innovating in policy delivery is a service designer's approach. And so our work is human-centered and collaborative. We're often creating visual materials and then iterating on those. And we're focused on creating a time-based understanding of a service and the many channels through which we interact with it. So we're not just focused on, the first time that you apply for SNAP, we're also focused on, logging back in, for example, in the Beeck context and trying to re-access your account. And so thinking about it over time throughout the life cycle. There's 2 other things that animate us. One of them is thinking about the future and what that might look like and what we might prefer it to look like and how we can get there. And then we're always interested in how what we do with public money can be publicly available for anybody who wants to use and learn from that work. So we can go to the next slide. So in all of our projects, we're doing generally 1 or 2 things, and those are looking at how a service is delivered and also how to design the policies that enable that service. And in order to do those things, we're doing many, many other things, which often look like creating hard copy materials, but we also create digital products, including tools and interfaces for benefits access. All of our projects come down to change management processes in some way. And so we're often doing research and evaluation with members of the public and the people who are involved in delivering and designing services. And throughout all of this, we're trying to engage with the community. As you can see here, that can look like sitting in a hotel conference room, but I haven't personally done that yet, because much more often we're going into the community and meeting people where they are and engaging them in more ethnographic research, which brings me to the research we're here to talk about today, which is the Digital Doorways to Public Benefits project. So the goal of this research, and we can go to the next slide, is to build on the extensive research and data that the Digital Benefits Network already has on digital identity systems, and bringing that ethnographic design researchers approach and lens, and hearing from people who have or are using and navigating these systems in different ways about their own experiences, and share those more broadly. Next slide. Our research was organized around 4 key inquiry areas in order to better understand those experiences. The first one was access. So looking at what barriers do people actually encounter when they're trying to use these digital systems across different situations. So that might mean different devices, it might mean different personal circumstances, but thinking about how those might impact access. Second would be consent and optionality. We wanted to understand how people experience choice and control in these systems. Do they feel they have any choice and control? How does that change? And whether they feel like they have real transparency about how their digital identity information is going to be used. The third one was support. So looking at what help is available to people when they need it, and how they actually interact with those support systems. And then finally, trust and perception. So looking at how these digital identity systems and external forces shape people's trust, their sense of agency, and their overall experience accessing the benefits that they need. So with those 4 inquiry areas in mind, we headed into the field with the Beeck team. And so we were in Boston, Massachusetts, and Phoenix and Tucson, Arizona in the end of March. And then we were in Yonkers, New York in the first week of April. And in those locations, we were connected with community-based organizations that Elizabeth mentioned, who were so generous, as well as public libraries, and shared their spaces and helped us connect with participants. This photo is from Just a Start. And we spoke to 33 participants. 29 of those were beneficiaries, and 4 of them were subject matter experts. And that latter category looked like legal aid professionals that are supporting people with their applications, as well as librarians who are often getting roped into helping with people access these systems. And we were focused on understanding more about Medicaid, SNAP, and unemployment insurance applications. However, we heard about WIC and TAMF throughout the process as well, just given the overlap and how the conversations unfolded. And our primary research method was 60-minute semi-structured interviews, where we're really digging into somebody's particular experience and letting that experience drive where we go in the conversation, but with a bit of a plan of what we might want to hit along the way. In those conversations, we use design stimuli. You can see on the board behind this participant, different screen captures. We created screen captures of all of the application processes that we could access in order for each state we went to, in order to be able to bring people back to those moments, which may not have been yesterday, and help give them, make it easier for them to talk about particular parts of the process and how that impacted their experience. And then finally, we captured video of people's experiences when they consented to it and consented to sharing it with you, which is how you were able to see some of this today. This is important to us. We want people to be able to discuss their experiences in their own words. And we also want to be able to share them with you so that folks can learn from what we were able to glean from it. So with all that in mind, I'm going to hand it over to Elizabeth, who's going to talk more about what we learned from this research.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jamie. So yeah, I'm going to share a bit more about what we learned from our interviews with beneficiaries. And because of the approach that we took to this research, as Jamie was just describing, I'm excited to be able to continue weaving in the voices of beneficiaries as I share more about these insights. And as I unpack what we learned, I also want to emphasize that all of our insights are meant to be generalizable beyond the states where we conducted research. And if folks have more questions about our research process, definitely excited to talk more about that in the Q&A, including sort of overall approach, compensation, et cetera. But yeah, so we can move on to the next slide. Our first insight was that beneficiaries regularly put aside privacy concerns in order to access benefits. So something we heard across our interviews was a sense of concern or resignation. People are often resigned to sharing personal data to access essential benefits, despite harboring deep concerns about which entities, government and private, will access their information. Many folks we spoke to are well aware of the risks of data breaches and are concerned about what will happen to their data. People we spoke to had concerns about government use of data, but also tended to trust private companies even less with their information. And on the next slide, I want to share a quote from one beneficiary that we spoke to in Arizona. Um, Sometimes you have to put in your information, even if you're not comfortable to get the services you need. It's part of the process. We just do it. We can move to the next slide. We also found that in Insight 2, security and convenience are often at odds in password use. So while beneficiaries value security, they also want to avoid getting locked out of their accounts. And as a result, convenience and ease of use are often prioritized. And in some cases, this means people are reusing passwords across multiple accounts. We also heard some about challenges that folks had recovering passwords stored in password managers if they lost access to an account or a device. Additionally, in terms of Insight 3, account access can prove difficult when personal information and service needs change. Beneficiaries' device access and personal circumstances are not constant. Email addresses change and service needs ebb and flow over time. This can present challenges for account re-access, potentially leading to delays, frustration, and duplicate accounts. And this is particularly relevant in the context of single sign-ons. One story that really stuck with me from our research was from a beneficiary we spoke to who had been trying to sign up for Medicaid in her state. Because it appeared she already had an account with the state, when she went to sign up, she wasn't able to make a new account. And she was struggling to recover her old account. Because she wasn't able to fix the issue in a timely fashion, she ended up applying for Medicaid over the phone. We can move on to the next slide. Related to that previous insight, unstable access to email accounts, phone numbers, and devices makes multi-factor authentication, or MFA, a challenge. MFA is, of course, a really important part of keeping accounts secure at this point, but when beneficiaries lose access to a device or get locked out of their email account, they may be unable to get back into their benefits account at all. I want to share a quote from a beneficiary on the next slide. So Chris in Arizona shared, there's been times where I didn't have my cell phone service on because I couldn't afford to, and I couldn't recover stuff because it couldn't text me. And you know, that brings you to your knees. You have to go and find somebody to help pay your cell phone bill so that you can recover your email, so that you can recover your state benefits account, so that you can keep your lights on. And to us, this quote really underscores the impacts of these people not working for people. These processes not working for people. Sorry. On the next slide, we also found that beneficiaries can struggle with biometric identity proofing for multiple reasons, including technical issues, a lack of proper identity documents, and confusion about how biometric tools are integrated with other application and verification processes. I realize this is a topic many folks might be eager to discuss, so happy to further unpack our learnings around this topic. But want you to be able to hear actually from a beneficiary directly about some potential usability issues.
I will say though that like right now we have the one phone that has service, which that's another service that we get is the Lifeline. Is that what it's called? I think it's Lifeline. So we get free phone service. So anyhow, the phone that has service on it does not, the camera is like the back camera's broken, but the front camera's not, or something like that. So I couldn't have done the ID Me using the camera, the only, availability that I had, I guess I could have like taken my picture with the other phone that doesn't have service and then like kind of like airdropped it or something to the phone that does so that I could send it on. But yeah, if I had the phones that I do now, or it would have really been, it would have been a struggle to be able to get that done.
Liz, you're muted.
Great, yes, thank you. Related to this, in Insight 6, some beneficiaries are comfortable sharing biometric data like images of their face to verify their identity, but others are reluctant to do so and worry about identity theft and scams. And we were really interested to note that split in terms of comfort with this technology. Moving on to the next slide, in terms of Insight 7, something that really came through in our interviews is that when navigating public benefits, even beneficiaries with self-described high digital literacy are looking for human support, and they may be willing to endure uncomfortable in-person experiences and long hold times on the phone to get it. Sometimes this is about troubleshooting a technical issue or confirming that someone has done a process correctly, or to receive reassurance about where they are in a process. And this importantly extends beyond the context just of dealing with digital identity processes into the overall experience of applying for managing benefits. Insight 8, we were really thinking about knowledge-based verification and security questions. So we found that knowledge-based verification and security questions best serve those with stable histories and easily recalled personal details. So that creates challenges for older beneficiaries and those with diverse life experiences. And in talking about security questions and knowledge-based verification, it's important to note that these are not considered strong security measures. Security questions are based on a secret that a user knows, such as the name of their middle school or their mother's maiden name. And these are set by the user and are used as a security feature when someone is logging into an account. Knowledge-based verification questions are multiple choice questions based on a user's private information, such as their credit history. And these are often used to verify someone's identity. Because answers to both these kinds of questions can be easily guessed or have been revealed in data breaches, they are not recommended security practices, even though they are still quite common, including in a benefits context. Additionally, advocates in the space have been underscoring for a long time that because of how knowledge-based verification often uses credit history, it doesn't work well for people who might not have credit history. And our findings really added color to that information here and more context on how people may experience challenges with security questions, which we'll hear a little bit more about in this next video.
And in the preset, it's usually like, when were you married? What's your spouse's name? What are your kids' names? I'm not married. I don't have kids. But like asking me what my childhood phone number was. I mean, I had 3. There's certain questions, especially in today's world where people are very transient. Asking a question like that it can be very ambiguous.
Finally, something that felt salient in our research was the learning that folks are interested in seeing their information kept safe and protected, and recognize that that might involve some level of friction. What was important to people, though, was understanding why a security measure was in place and it feeling proportionate to the context, as we'll hear in this next video.
And I had to do a virtual call with an assistant as well to double, I think quadruple verify that I'm me, which is fine because of course I do not want to go to jail for fraud, but I was just like, God, just imagine if this was an emergency. I don't have time to wait for a virtual phone call. I give you all this information. Can we just go ahead and get it over with?
So based on these insights, we made a series of recommendations across 3 main areas: building trust, account creation and authentication, and identity proofing. There's a lot more detail in the final report, but I want to spend just a few minutes walking through those recommendations at a high level. I also want to acknowledge that it could feel overwhelming to encounter this full set of recommendations, but we wanted to present a lot of detail here so that folks have some idea of what this could look like, but we don't expect agencies to engage with all of these recommendations at once. State agencies are at different stages of their identity management, design, and implementation journeys. We also know that in the coming months and years, agencies will continue to have to make choices about which improvements to prioritize. Some of the recommendations that we're making may require additional resources to enact, while others can be achieved using existing staffing and resources. Additionally, agencies can prioritize a selection of the recommendations based on their clients' needs and available resources instead of implementing them all simultaneously. And the last thing that I'll note on recommendations before I kind of jump in to a little bit more detail is that our team is eager and available to meet with state and local agencies who are interested in considering whether they might be able to use some of these recommendations in their own work to talk through what that might look like. Um, and yeah, so let's move on to the next slide and I'll start walking through this in a little bit more detail. So in terms of building trust, the recommendations in that section really focus on increasing human support and transparency around digital identity processes and requirements to help beneficiaries feel more confident in what they are being asked to do and also understand how their data and information will be used and with whom it will be shared. And when it comes to accounts and authentication, on the next slide, we recommend a few things, including that agencies take a risk-based approach to evaluating whether a specific interaction or transaction requires an account. For example, does someone need it to create an account to submit an application, or can account creation at that stage be optional? We also suggest structuring the password creation process to help beneficiaries make strong security choices. This might involve revisiting password creation requirements to ensure you're not overcomplicating the process for users without meaningful security gains. And also considering alternative authentication methods like passkeys, which may not work for all, but can increase the security of account reaccess for those individuals for whom it does work. We also suggest making it clear to folks how they can recover their password if needed, since a lot of the kind of choices to prioritize convenience over security seem to come from a fear of getting locked out that we were hearing from beneficiaries. And we suggest providing multiple pathways for individuals to successfully use multi-factor authentication and clear information about why MFA is important and needed. Something that came through loud and clear in our research was that MFA, even though it's a very important security measure, isn't working consistently for folks. And in our recommendations, we're making suggestions to offer multiple MFA options so people can select the methods that will work for them, and also to investigate other options like trusted recovery contacts. On the next slide, in terms of identity proofing, we also suggest taking a risk-based approach to whether you're using identity proofing online. So that involves assessing whether identity proofing is really necessary for a given transaction and to what extent. And this includes considering where in the user journey identity proofing occurs. For example, you might not need identity proofing before account creation or application submission, but it could be introduced later, such as before issuing payments or for applicants that require additional screening. If proofing is necessary, we also suggest trying to make sure there are multiple ways for someone to prove their identity. Beneficiaries really do want their private information to remain secure and private, but they also want to be able to successfully apply for and manage their benefits through the channels that work best for them. And finally, we suggest being cautious about adopting alternatives like biometrics and mobile driver's licenses. It feels clear that we need to innovate in the area of identity proofing service design, but emerging technologies should be carefully evaluated and only used with strong guardrails. We suggest not defaulting to biometrics. As we heard in our interviews, not everyone is able to use that technology or comfortable with that approach. And the existing research suggests that even with improvements, there remain concerns about accuracy in performance of this technology across racial and ethnic groups, as well as usability concerns for people with disabilities, and general privacy concerns about data storage and retention. And we suggest approaching the integration of digital IDs or mobile driver's licenses with the right questions and caution, emphasizing strong privacy guardrails and data minimization practices. So now that we are releasing this report, we're eager to talk to all of you about what else you think is needed on this topic. But we also have a few ideas of our own, including additional research with individuals facing particularly high barriers to accessing benefits. So many of the people that we spoke to self-describe as at least somewhat tech savvy, but those folks themselves were still encountering challenges with the processes of creating and managing accounts and proving their identities. We believe additional research with individuals who face greater barriers to accessing public benefits will also be very important. So we're advocating for additional research with populations who are likely to experience the most difficulty with digital identity processes. This includes adults over 65, people with disabilities, identity theft victims, individuals living in rural communities, as well as individuals with limited English proficiency and beneficiaries without technology or broadband access. We think that more time with more people will offer a fuller picture of common barriers and help us illuminate potential solutions. Secondly, we also think usability testing and observational research would be very valuable here. So our research was using semi-structured interviews, as Jamie was talking about, to learn about people's perceptions and experiences. So to extend the insights included in this report, we advocate for live usability testing sessions where beneficiaries interact with digital identity processes, allowing researchers to observe real-time emotional responses, behaviors, technical and process-oriented difficulties, and points of confusion. We think states and folks partnering with states may be in a good position to lead on this research, as they have the most power to implement changes to digital identity processes based on what they learn. And lastly, we also think there's an opportunity for co-creation of design patterns for account creation, account reaccess, and identity proofing. So benefits across the system use different designs for their digital identity processes. Co-created design patterns, so blueprints for what these digital identity processes look like that could be reused across states, could reduce the labor and resources needed to design these processes, and if co-created with beneficiaries and applicants, could help ensure that these systems work well for the people who use them. And the last thing that I will say is that we really want to keep this conversation going after today's event, especially with our colleagues in government at the state and local level. So we would love to hear from you if you or your team are interested in further discussing what we learned in this research and the recommendations in the report. And we're especially interested to talk about how we can make sure the recommendations we're making best serve your agency. So we will now be opening up our Q&A portion of today's event and asking you all to put questions that you'd like to have us talk about in that Zoom Q&A feature. As Elisa is saying in the chat, no question is too big or too small. So whether it's about the recommendations, the insights, the research process itself, very eager to get those questions going. So Quinny and Elisa, I'm just checking in to see what questions we have so far.
Thanks, Liz. Yeah, there's one question on knowledge-based verification, that there are some vendors that don't use things like address, but they ask information about their case. Would you recommend that form of knowledge-based verification?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. And if I understand correctly, this person is referring to the use of knowledge-based verification practices where someone is answering questions about themselves that aren't necessarily based on their credit history file. So I think that does potentially address the issue of like, let's say I'm a person who doesn't have a credit history that an identity verifier would be able to access and then create those multiple choice questions for me. So it does address that kind of challenge, but I do think in terms of like offering folks strong evidence-based ways to verify their identity, there is still, of course, the risk that that information, even about someone's case, could be breached and accessed by an unauthorized user and then used to actually successfully answer those questions, but not on behalf of like the intended actual user. So I think that it potentially addresses some of the challenges in terms of folks not having like credit history files to be pulling those questions from. But I think in terms of being a method for demonstrating like or proving someone's identity, still vulnerable to some of those same challenges in terms of data breaches, things like that.
Thank you. Some other questions. I know Darnell dropped a few in here and he's gotten a few votes, so we definitely want to make time for his. Um, so in the interviews, did you stick with physical design stimuli and did you ever introduce the sites they used on a device?
I can hop in on that one. We largely used the design stimuli for a couple of reasons. One of them was we were trying to get at account creation, which is going to be harder to do if somebody's already created an account, unless you're making them create a duplicate account. And so that just worked better to do with the physical stimuli because we could have the screenshots of what the process they would have gone through would look like. That said, there were a couple situations where we had people pull up their actual accounts. One of them, we couldn't get into their account because their cell phone they had lost their cell phone, or their cell phone broke, and so they couldn't get two-factor. So it definitely made real the challenges associated with that. So we did sometimes use a device, but it was primarily the design stimuli would be the answer to that one.
Thanks, Jamie. I think on that note, there are some questions just about like the folks who participated. Did they have next steps about the research? And like, yeah, like what would be kind of like how would this report is it going to make an impact on their day-to-day, or is this kind of more of a systemic level intervention?
I think we're really upfront with participants before we speak to them or get into any kind of an interview with them about what the intention of the research is. And it's largely to help people that are going to be going through this process going forward, which may also include participants, but we're definitely not promising like we're going to be able to follow up on your particular experience because that's just not the scope of what we're doing. And so most people are participating because they're motivated by wanting to make this process better for other people going forward. And so that's also our hope. So we're able to share that with them. We will share the report with them now that it's come out. And folks are often interested in seeing what that looks like. But yeah, we're generally aligned. We're always aligned with research participants about it being sort of more of a systemic level intervention.
Yeah, just piggybacking off of that, and Jamie, thank you for answering that. I think something that we really appreciated in working with Public Policy Lab on this is like that the consent process really makes that clear upfront. And also like if folks are raising immediate urgent challenges, thinking about how to like refer folks to resources, while also being clear about like the scope of this is really like this research project that is focused on making systemic improvements, and that being very clear in the consent process. So that was something we really appreciated in being able to work together on this project. I see we have a question about quant and qualitative coding methods that we used to understand the impact and scale of each insight. Jamie, do you want to talk about that one as well?
Yes. So design research is not interested in generally or sort of generalizable truths or statistical significance. We're interested in getting to knowledge saturation and understanding what is coming up. And generally speaking, it's not the same sort of research that requires coding methods the way you might think about it for like more of a statistical analysis. That said, and if you want to know more about kind of the way, if you're not familiar with how design research works, I would recommend looking up Thick Data, Why Big Data Needs Thick Data by Trisha Wang. It is a really interesting article that is like, I would say will answer all of your questions and also create a whole bunch of new ones. But in terms of how we treat the data that we collect, because it is data, we use Airtable, and what we do is we take what we call what we heards from each conversation we're having, as well as from desk research, and those are sort of key important things. Generally, they're quotes that have come from the participants themselves. And then in our synthesis process, along with the Beeck team, we basically shake all of those things we've learned up, we affinity map them, look at how they're related, look at how they're different, and use each of those data points to create a picture of the whole, which we often do with sticky notes, but also through other ways.
Yeah, just adding to that a little bit. I think in working with Public Policy Lab, it was really awesome to get to really spend so much time with all of the interview data and go back over them many times as a team. And happy to talk more about some of the tools that we used collaboratively. But as someone who comes from like an ethnographic research background myself, in my graduate work before joining the DBN and the Beeck Center, I think that emphasis on thick data to really get into sort of what people's perceptions and experiences were, was something that felt really special about this project.
There's a few questions here regarding passkeys and passwords. So the first question is like, how do y'all feel about passkeys and helping people ease this process? And the second one is, if you found that people gave up during the account creation process, sorry, did you find that people gave up during the account creation process, or in resetting their passwords? Just really wanting to know like suggestions for how to advise people on that step. So passkeys, yes or no, and then what should people do when they are having problems like with logging in or resetting their passwords?
Yeah, I can take those questions. On the first one, I think in terms of a yes, no, passkeys, definitely more complicated than that. I think we're really early in terms of seeing passkey implementation at like the state level for like public facing services that, for example, beneficiaries would be using. And so I think definitely really interested in this being an authentication approach that state agencies are starting to use, and a place where we're eager to learn more from states about how what that uptake is looking like, who among their user groups are using it, what kind of success are they having, et cetera. And so that's something that I think like we're very eager to see more information and research around how that is working in a public benefits context. What Ariel is saying in the chat is correct, as far as I know, that Michigan's the only state that's using it in their like state single sign-on, and their state single sign-on is integrated with benefits applications or portals in the state. So very eager to kind of further explore that. And then the second question,
Yes, it
yeah.
has.
So I'm in terms of, I think that it would probably depend, and I'm not sure what the question asker is referring to in terms of what to advise people. Like if that's about like what's the security best practice here, or like what's going to be easiest. Um, I think we heard from some folks who maybe couldn't, like who had forgotten a password and maybe would reset it. But I don't know that we have like a generalizable thing that we can say what you would necessarily want to advise people here without knowing more about the context in which you're operating.
Grace in the chat just asked, what is your advice for the best way to get state agencies to listen to your insights and begin to implement them?
Grace, that's a great question. I think we've been really excited to see how many folks in state and local government have been interested in learning more about this report and talking to us about it. And I think something that I would emphasize is that we did this research because we wanted to be able to provide state agencies across the country with, again, not generalizable like statistical truths, but generalizable insights about what is and isn't working for folks. And in terms of how to sort of get folks to think about how to listen to these, I think we're eager for any suggestions that folks on this call might have about other places we should be sharing about or talking about this research. But one of the ways that we are trying to reach state agencies already is through direct one-to-one outreach, having conversations where we can talk about what we learned in this report, and what our recommendations are, and asking state agencies questions about what of these recommendations resonate for you? Where would you need more information to be able to implement X or Y? So I think so far, really thinking about that direct outreach and one-on-one conversations as being a key part of how we're hoping to share about this research, and also give state agencies an opportunity to ask us questions so that we can continue to refine how we're framing these recommendations.
There's another question asking, in our work with the states at USDOL, the common response was that states were comfortable with IAL2 verification that could be challenging for certain claimants and addressed equity concerns by supporting non-digital alternatives like in-person proofing. How do you feel about this approach?
Yeah, I can take this question. So, for folks in the audience who may or may not know, IAL2 refers to Identity Assurance Level 2, which is a term that comes from the National Institute of Standards NIST's digital identity guidelines and is talking about sort of like a level of assurance or confidence associated with specific approaches to identity proofing. So, it goes from like IAL1 to up to IAL3. Um, I think this question is really interesting. I think the thing that I would say here is that taking an approach where you're saying, like, my primary option maybe is going to be this IAL2 level verification, and there are multiple ways to achieve that, right? That I know won't work for everyone, but I'm going to have a clear off ramp of in-person proofing. I think the thing that we would probably come back to is, did the state agency go through what is called like a digital identity risk management process as laid out in the guidelines or something similar to answer the question of like, what are the risks for this specific transaction? Is IAL2 the right level of verification for this context? Why am I arriving at that level? And then what are those sort of supplemental options like in-person proofing? So I think the question here is like, how do we feel about this approach probably depends a little bit on what was the process that an agency used to arrive at that being what they understand to be the right approach for them, and is it based on sort of a risk management approach to asking and answering that question.
Thank you.
I will say, kind of as a side note there, and we mentioned this in the report and have said this in previous conversations, in-person proofing is likely not going to be the most convenient method for everybody, but having an in-person proofing option for folks for whom the technology doesn't work, or who aren't comfortable with the technology or online options available, we do think is a really important kind of piece of the overall identity proofing service design process.
Um, I think we might have time for one or two more questions. There's one here. Did your research provide any insights about more complicated benefits access requirements, such as those that might require identity proofing in addition to eligibility verification via categorical eligibility, like SNAP, or attribute veteran or disabled or data, such as income level?
That's a great question. So this research was really focused on beneficiaries' experiences with the processes that they're asked to do, like account creation, managing accounts, uploading documents about their identity, other sort of other pieces of like that front end experience, and their perceptions and experiences with it. I do think something that we are interested to continue talking about is the intersection of identity proofing with some of these other verification processes that might happen when on the back end when someone is applying for benefits. And so opens up questions about what pieces of this kind of process are front end requirements or requirements that a beneficiary is actually interacting with, but that was not the focus of this particular project.
Thank you, Liz. And we have time for one more question. Um,
Just taking a look at some of the great questions that have come in. Exciting to see so many questions being asked.
I think we'll go with,
Um,
yeah, how can identity proofing processes be redesigned to reduce abandonment rates among beneficiaries with limited digital access?
Yeah, so that's really the question of the hour, I think. And I think in the registration, we also got a question about like, what are abandonment rates across different parts of these processes? And we don't have like national level data about that just because this is a patchwork of different systems. and there isn't publicly available data from across programs by any means. But I think in terms of how could identity proofing processes be redesigned to reduce abandonment, is thinking about when are they being used, how well are they being explained? Is it clear to a person what they need to complete that process? Is it being explained to them why it is important? And yeah, when during that application or enrollment or renewal process is that happening? And is there clear support available to someone, human support, to help them if they are struggling with that requirement? And I, yes, want to just really second what Ariel has shared in the chat here, in terms of understanding abandonment rates better, right? Because like this research, we talked to uh, 29 beneficiaries in 3 states. It would be amazing to see kind of at scale nationally more data that would help us as an ecosystem understand kind of at scale some of these pain points and drop off points. So if anyone working in a government agency is interested in talking about what it might look like to do that, our team is, of course, very interested to have that conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for answering those questions. Thank you for asking those questions. Um, we're going to keep collecting y'all's questions, and even if we can't answer them all on this call, we still want to make sure that we're addressing the things that y'all are bringing up. So feel free to email us or drop any more questions in the chat. But at this point, we are going to transition towards our next steps. So if you could transition to that slide. Let's give me a few slides in. Yeah, there we go. So as far as our next steps go, there's 3 opportunities that y'all can get involved in moving forward. On October 8th, we are hosting an advocate session, and this is going to be co-hosted with Kate Hansen at Meals for Families. And essentially at this event, what we're going to do is we're going to help advocates kind of have more like action-oriented ways to use these insights and recommendations to champion public benefits access and human-centered design. So if you want to register for our advocate session, we're added that in the chat. And then secondly is share the report. We have the full report, the executive summary, and the introductions, and the Digital Doorways introduction video. So if you can, drop that in your LinkedIn, send it to a friend. Just the video alone, I think is really powerful if folks are just trying to get folks to just learn a little bit more about this. And lastly is also we would love to get y'all feedback on our survey. We want to know what you thought of this call, but also like what other areas of research do we need to be making in public benefits, whether that's directly in digital identity or other components of public benefits technology, so that we can better support states and local agencies to help people apply for those services. So that link is dropped in the chat. We have 2 minutes left. I'd love for you to use your time to give us feedback there on what you thought of this webinar and what further research is needed. And lastly, I invite you to reach out to our team. As I mentioned earlier, our email is digid@georgetown.edu, and we also welcome you to join our digital identity community of practice, where we talk about a lot more of these topics honed in with our community of practice members. We meet once a quarter and have additional events and webinars and Q&As in between those meetings. So definitely invite you to learn a little bit more about our community of practice. But as for that, there's nothing else for me besides saying thank you to everyone for participating, and for your amazing questions. So we hope to see you soon, and please reach out if you have any more touch points that you want to chat about. I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you.